Hey everyone, we are the Unconventional Therapists, and this is your guide to nothing, where each and every week we take a topic, theme, or thing, overanalyze it, and make it all make sense in the scheme of life, living, and mental health. My name is Dave. I'm joined here with my time-traveling partner, Greg. What up, Greg?
What up? You had some good cadence on that one, Dave. I enjoyed that. It was almost melodic.
I strive to be melodic, I would say.
Yeah. Well, okay. So listen, Dave, we've talked about urban legends before, and urban legends are told by the few to control the many. The stories we're going to talk about today are told by the many, or at least members of the many, members of the populace, to warn the few. And they're rarely as good as the regular urban legends because, I don't know, maybe we don't have the infrastructure. Maybe we don't have the backing,
Interesting.
But what I'm referring to is, in a sense, conspiracy theories. And two very specific conspiracy theories.
9/11.
Nope. Oh, my God. That's an edit. So we're doing the Montauk and the Philadelphia experiment. Now, listen, Dave. It's impossible for us to get these stories correct, mostly because they're untrue.
Yeah,
for the most part, right? And sometimes I know we both feel a lot of pressure to always have all the information, always be getting these stories exactly right. And my friend John Eric, I'm going to call him out, says sometimes he listens to the cast and he says that he leaves with more questions than he started with about a subject. And I want him to understand, and to everyone to understand, sometimes that's the point. We just want you to be thinking about these things, or thinking about the psychological angle on almost that could be taking place with almost any subject. And if you have more questions about something that we're talking about, that's great. I think that's part of the point, right?
So yeah, John Eric, there's your answer. And you left me with a question, John Eric. Where's your last name? Because those are two first ones.
It's yes. Actually, no. His full name is John Eric Joseph Schneiderhan. He had the longest name in school.
Wait, that's three first names followed by a super long last name.
Yeah, his first name is John Eric. It's John-Eric.
Oh,
his middle name is Joseph, and his last name is Schneiderhan.
Imagine your first name involving two first names.
That's right. Do you remember the song John Jingleheimer Schmidt? Same amount of syllables. Same amount of syllables in the name. Anyway. So
Schneiderhoffen? Is that what you said?
Schneiderhan.
Oh, I don't know why I needed it like that.
Hunderhoffman.
I wanted it to be that, I think.
So listen, Dave, why did conspiracy theories get such a bad rap? Because when I'm thinking of conspiracy theories, I'm thinking of tinfoil hats. I'm thinking of, QAnon stuff and lizard people.
Why is the all right? So I'm going to ask a question that's probably going to, seem dumb, but I literally don't know where the tinfoil hat thing came from. I first saw it on the movie Signs by M. Night Shyamalan. Shout out to M. Night. Big fan of the podcast.
Yeah. Proud sponsor of the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. But I saw it in Signs when they wear the tinfoil hats. I didn't know what it was really referring to. I was like, oh, that's crazy. They wear tinfoil hats. They're so crazy.
Yeah. No, I think it might be related to these two, or at least elements of these two conspiracy theories, in that the government is trying to use, either the government or aliens are trying to use mind control and use aluminum foil because that can bounce off the gamma rays.
Are you telling me the question I'm asking you, I should have already known the answer because I actually researched this thing for the past week?
Yeah.
And I never came up with that answer. So my research is terrible.
Well, that doesn't come up in the research, though. I mean, tinfoil hats don't come up in the research. That's people's own ingenuity.
I actually literally read it.
Oh, okay.
Tinfoil hats, and I didn't realize what they were saying. I started to read it, and I was like, boring, and I just kept moving on to like the next paragraph. I was like, I don't care about tinfoil hats.
Yeah, no, these stories, they're interesting. So I thought the one I'm going to start off with is...
Oh, you mean the better one?
The much better one?
That you gave to yourself and gave me the other one.
Yeah, cool. No, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. All right, so let's start this thing off with the Philadelphia experiment. And what's your experience with this before you
Tom Hanks, Denzel Washington, super like edgy for the time, you know?
Wait, Tom Hanks and oh my God. Are you talking about Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that was a tearjerker, that movie.
I love that movie.
It's a great movie. It really is. Oh, man.
Great performances.
But there is a movie, and we'll talk about the Philadelphia Experiment movie, but let me start by saying this is a wild one. This is a wild one. And as a former sailor, I'm embarrassed. That's what I'll say. So, without further ado, in 1956, a 56-year-old man named Morris Jessup he's kind of a normal guy. He's selling car parts, but he's also working on his PhD in astrophysics. He has his master's in astronomy. So he's kind of like a jack of all trades here. He taught science at Drake University. He wrote 2 books about UFOs. And out of the blue one day, he receives a letter from a fan. And it's kind of a cryptic letter. And it's the author of the letter. His name is Carl Allen. And he uses multiple different aliases in the letters. But essentially, he tells Morris that he knows that Albert Einstein and his theory is his unified field theory, which is one of Albert Einstein's biggest dead end theories. It's this thought that you could manipulate space and time, and everything can be run with simple equations once you figure out what these equations are. Essentially, like magnetic fields, gravity fields, anything with the word field after it, you can control, which the Navy is super interested in because you could apparently in some way bend light to make objects disappear. Like
this story is off the walls.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, if this is at all possible, if Albert Einstein's like, look, there's this thing that can happen where you can make it so these huge ships can disappear, that's very useful to the government.
I'll be like, Albert, give me these secrets, Albert.
Give me the secrets. Give me the secrets. And I'm sorry, like I don't know everything about unified field theory. I couldn't learn science in 1 week. All I know is that this was some pretty intense technological stuff that I couldn't really wrap my head around. But the Navy, they wanted to weaponize this. They wanted to they were all about, boy, what would it be like if we could have our ships cross the ocean and no one sees them, right? So the author of the letter tells the story about when he was a sailor on a ship that was docked across from the USS Eldridge. And he noticed, he was out late one night smoking a cigarette, and he noticed the green fog that started creeping up and looked almost like a force field that was surrounding the ship. And out of nowhere, the ship disappears. But before that, like he sees like sailors on the boat, and they're like kind of getting a little translucent and ghostly looking. And he's like, this is really weird. And then in this instant, the ship disappears. But the water is still displaced, like it's there, which is very weird. It reminds me of my sister used to tell this ghost story where like she would wake up in the middle of the night and there would be a little bump, like a little indent in her bed where like a ghost was sitting talking to her. I don't know why it reminds me of that. Anyways, seconds later, the ship reappears and Carl Allen hears blood-curdling screams, the loudest screams he could ever imagine. And what has happened is the ship teleported to Norfolk, which is 300 miles away. It came back. And so everyone on it went along for this, magical teleportation. So, but everything when everything came back together in its spot, it was just off a little bit. Like, the movie The Fly, where like there's a fly in there and he keeps coming back and he's turning into a fly slowly. It's kind of like that, except that the ship's back, the ship's intact, but maybe that the human organisms weren't cut out for this kind of travel. And the men on the ship are like, they're stuck in the floor. They're stuck in the walls.
There's literally body parts stuck in the ship. In the ship.
So like, you got to picture this. Like, how do you paint this picture, Dave?
There's body parts stuck in the ship.
It's almost like, in Jumanji when they're falling through the floor and then like his head's stuck in the floor. and all you can like see is like his mouth and he's screaming, and that's one guy, right? His mouth's like in the wall. Maybe you hear other screams and there's someone stuck inside the wall.
I know there's arms in the wall.
Yeah, arms coming out of the wall.
Let me ask you a question. All right. First of all, here's my first little
you got a problem with it.
Pothole in the story. The ship's name. What is it again?
The USS Eldridge.
Ooh, the USS Eldridge, you say? Yeah. Oh, that's weird. That's really strange. Who named it, Greg? H.P. Lovecraft?
Wow.
He has the Eldritch monsters in his stories. Eldritch is a Scottish word meaning weird, ghostly, unnatural, frightful, or hideous.
Oh,
and it just happens to be the ship that this happens on.
Dave, that's a nice connection. I mean, but the thing is, this ship really is called the Eldridge, and there's no denying there's a Navy ship called the USS Eldridge.
But it's like, I think it's primed for a story because of the name, right?
Yeah, because everyone's like a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan. I mean,
every sailor loves H.P. Lovecraft.
They handed a little copy of the Necronomicon or whatever.
He does have a story about like being lost at sea or something, or like I'm trying to remember the name of it. The Temple, I think, right?
Yeah, sea monsters, tons of that.
Yeah,
tons of space stuff, tons of alien stuff. Yeah, maybe. Anyways, Carl signs off the letter for no reason at all. He I thought this was funny. He signs the letter very disrespectfully yours, Carl Allen. And then just like with the series of numbers, and Morris is like, what are all these numbers? But it ends up being his sailor identification code. I don't know. I didn't even know that was the thing. And I was in the Navy, but whatever.
Not a humble brag.
Humble brag, yes. So of course Jessup wants to talk more. He wants to talk to more witnesses.
Hey, prove you're in the Navy. Where's your number?
I'll write it down and send it to you in a letter. Sorry. So Carl says he can't track anyone down. He says that he can't really find any other witnesses, and the Navy's doing a huge cover up. So Jessup reaches out to the Navy and gives him Carl's return address, which happens to be a vacant house. But I have a problem with this. So this guy, Carl, is trying to reach out to Morris Jessup and be like, hey, look, you write UFO books. Like, what's going on with the government? And the first thing Jessup does is go tell on him to the government.
Narc.
I know. So, of course, a year later, and I'm going to have some questions for you, because a year later, Jessup gets a call from the Office of Naval Research. And that's like a department of the Navy where they do their special research, projects. And they received this copy of Jessup's book in the mail, and it has written in the margins in 3 different color ink, like these super advanced technological conversations. And the writers referred to humans as if they're talking about a different species. So like they're having these conversations in the margins of a copy of Jessup's book, which is kind of crazy. And they talk about UFOs and propulsion experiments. And they also speak of the invisibility and the technology that was supposedly used to make the ship disappear.
Okay.
So
where does it end?
Well, I mean, we're getting there. The Navy has a special projects division, and the book gets sent up the chain of command. And to me, that suggests that there's something to the story. So, all right. So yes, this is a conspiracy theory, but do I think that maybe the Navy and government were trying to work with? It's been proven that they did try all kinds of like mind control and what's that, MK Ultra?
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing that I feel I've heard the most when I'm researching about conspiracy theories is when something is declassified, there is that kind of proves the legitimacy to some of the theories, but that it was just like nothing came of it. So like if something's declassified about like mind control or teleportation, that means, yeah, sure, they were probably doing research to try to figure out how to do those things, but they weren't able to, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't tell us.
Right. 100%.
It's like that way of like the government saying, let me give you this much so that you guys will trust us, to prove that like we'll show you things once in a while. But in actuality, they're not showing us anything because they're only showing us things that they weren't able to actually bring to fruition, right?
Or maybe they screwed up so bad that it's embarrassing and they can't let that information get out. And they don't want people kind of
Oh yeah, yeah, like
going down
hiding
yeah, of course,
things
it's all
that
about
could
hiding things.
incriminate them. Yeah, yeah, no, I totally believe that. Let me just ask you a question. Like, does that make us conspiracy theorists because we think the government is hiding or covering things up? Does that mean we believe in conspiracies or we're just realists?
No, what I think the government is doing is not so much covering things up. I think people give the government a lot of credit when it's like, oh, they're doing these super advanced things to I think that the government screws things up more than they cover things up. And that's
Sure.
what they're covering up. Right?
Yeah.
It's more
But
covering your own screw ups.
I do believe that they probably have researched alien activity, like
Of
odd
course.
things. Like I do believe that stuff to be true, and I don't think that that makes me like a tinfoil hat guy. I just think that, like, of course, that's what they're there for, to kind of explore and investigate and go places that we're not allowed to go because they like to control us.
Well, what do you think? I mean, in 2020, as COVID's going on, most people weren't even paying attention, but there was some kind of admission about UFOs, right? Like,
Yeah,
I didn't follow that.
right.
It's crazy that it was in the news and no one really gave a shit. Were things that crazy in 2020?
No, and I feel like something even more recently came up where, like after 2020, where they like changed the name. I forget what they changed UFO to, but like, and like even that itself was kind of interesting because that kind of acknowledges something being present if you actually like are going to go as far as changing the name of it. So
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
been things that have kind of come up, and I feel like it's interesting. The more like when we're actually learning things or they're telling us things, we don't care.
I
But like
know.
when they don't tell us things, we're like, oh, I want to know. Please tell me.
That's just the human nature, isn't it?
It is.
It's funny because once the Navy, and back to Jessup, once the Navy starts kind of acting a little shady about it, this, of course, now he's interested, just like you're kind of talking about right there. Like now he's like, all right, well, no, there must be something going on there. And he's digging in real hard. And once he starts digging in real hard, Jessup, I mean, he's written a couple books. He's a smart guy. Like he's working on his PhD, he's got his master's. Right after people who are close to Jessup say he's getting close, he's onto something,
Yeah.
they find him in his car and say he committed suicide, but it also looked kind of staged. It's like, and the cops, when they showed up, there just happened to be a doctor there, and there was no reason for him to go to the hospital, or no autopsy, no investigation. And it's interesting. And then this whole Philadelphia experiment goes completely off the wall. When the movie comes out in 1984, there's this guy, Al Balick, who watches the movie, and he's just like this 6-year-old contractor for the government. And he sees the movie and he feels uneasy. And he's like, ooh, there's something about this movie, and I don't really know what it is. So he goes through like a hypnotic past life regression, and he remembers, quote unquote, that 50 years before he was a sailor on the Eldridge, and the ship he was on, he remembers his name was Edward Cameron, which he doesn't get that name quite right. There was someone with a name close to that on the ship. And the government had erased his memories. And this guy, Al Balick, had traveled first to 2147 and then, all these different years.
2137, right? I thought.
Yeah, like all these different years, which is just kind of like insane. And he meets all these people, these guys that worked on the Manhattan Project. It's like this wild story about repressed memories. But I think that's where, for me, it goes off the rails a little bit, and where they lose the credibility. That's what always seems to happen with conspiracy theory. You have this story, it's almost believable, but then it just goes.
And then they're eating babies.
I know. Then it just goes a step too far, right?
Yeah. Right.
And then so you're talking about that QAnon stuff, and it's like, I'm not familiar with that whole conspiracy theory fully.
That's how they get their strength.
Oh, okay. That comes from blood libel back, hundreds and centuries ago.
That's just common sense, though.
Oh yeah, obviously.
You drink the blood of the youth, obviously you're going to get youth power.
That is like the best we can do kind of synopsis of the Philadelphia experiment. And I think we might do even worse when it comes to the Montauk, because it's this one's so.
You know what, Greg? It might be worse, but I'm going to have a damn good time with it. So why don't you watch it?
Dave, that's all that matters. And I want you to have fun with this. And please, the mic is yours.
Let me have fun with this shitty story.
Have fun with it.
All right, Montauk. The Montauk Project. Let me tell you about the Montauk Project. Well, first off, it is a theory that alleges that the US government were illegally performing experiments conducted at Camp Hero, which is in Montauk, New York.
Mm.
Right. Wonderful place. Never
Beautiful.
been, but it looks wonderful. Have you been?
No, but there was a show on Showtime called The Affair, which I was kind of obsessed with the show, and it all took place in Montauk.
Oh,
It made me have an affinity for the area.
It's really telling about you.
Hmm.
So there's actually a movie that I loved called Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind, which we've talked about before off air. And he has a line in there, which always made me want to go to Montauk. He says, she says, meet me at Montauk. And I was like, I got to go there.
It's a weird way to say it, though. It's like saying, meet me at Rhode Island.
Meet me at Montauk.
Okay.
Very alluring. So at Montauk, though, at Camp Hero, supposedly they were doing experiments for developing psychological warfare techniques, similar to what you were talking about, and time travel and teleportation and mind control.
Yeah. So Montauk's like almost everything, right? It's like they're doing everything there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a pretty cool looking place. So, I mean, if you Google or look on YouTube, there's people that have explored Montauk, the Camp Hero. So it's an abandoned place now, and it looks like people can hop the fence and go take a look at your own discretion. It's trespassing, but do what you may. So it was first commissioned in 1942 by the U.S. Army to defend the East Coast during World War II. So the camp was originally armed with 3 gun batteries to defend New York versus possible attacks by the German ships and submarines. But then it was deactivated 5 years later in 1947. They removed its coastal artillery, and it was transferred to the Air Force in 1951, where they installed this badass radar, which is the most notable thing about it. It's this giant radar on the top of the building. Greg, did you see the building?
Yeah, it's the biggest in the world, right? Or at least it was.
So cool looking.
But what's it supposed to do?
Just radar.
Okay.
It's just radaring things, you know.
Yeah. It's like
just radar stuff.
Like what dolphins do?
Yep.
Okay.
All that. mostly what dolphins do, though. Yeah, definitely. So so they install that, and anti-aircraft artillery training begins there. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of to current day about the place itself. The Air Force remained active until about 1982. And in 1984, the land was donated. So that's when it became a national park. So because it was deemed environmentally important due to the ecosystems and the animal life there. And then it was transferred to the New York State Department and became Camp Hero State Park. That officially opened in 2002. And that's kind of where it sits abandoned today. So yeah, like I said, look up pictures. It's pretty cool looking. Supposedly, though, this place, aside from having this giant radar system, also has a bunch of tunnels and labs and all that stuff underground. And that's where they were essentially holding the experiments. Now, I read one thing about after the war ended, the U.S. recruited Nazi scientists who helped various projects developing weapons and technology, as well as partaking in those experiments that we were talking about before. Basically, the major claim is that they were doing human experimenting. So not just like trying to tinker with technology, but actually kidnapping boys off the streets of Montauk. Yeah. So there is a term called the Montauk Boys. And allegedly thousands of children were taken from the streets and kept below ground, abused, and then programmed into little super soldiers known as the Montauk Boys. They were using powerful frequencies, and scientists supposedly tapped into their consciousness and could control the minds of these children. And Greg, I think you mentioned this earlier in the start about MK Ultra. So this was essentially considered to be like an extension of MK Ultra, and it was basically like top secret CIA mind control program. Did you know about the Montauk Boys? Did you read anything?
So no, you're blowing me away with the Montauk Boys, and the reason
you're a little
is,
jealous, aren't you?
I'm very jealous.
The Buttonwood Boys, the Montauk Boys.
They sound like a fun group.
You guys were kidnapped a little bit and held underground. So were they?
Listen, kidnapping was a big deal in the 80s and early 90s, and you know it. So let's not joke. But like, I think that, you know, you were probably going to get into it, but I'm going to cut you off because this is like what the most recent season of Stranger Things. When they're all the kids.
No, this is the whole premise of Stranger Things. If you think about
the whole thing, right? I mean,
11 is essentially one of those children that would be a Montauk boy.
Although
they're underground. Greg, it's 2023, bro. Grow up. Montauk people, they call it.
Thank you. Yes.
And yeah, they're doing all those experiments with them in season 4. They definitely like really go into that, but like we see that from the start. They actually show the radar in the show, which I didn't even really realize until like I ran across something about that. Is it season 2 where my boy Dustin is like trying to like do like get a radar signal or something like that? Don't they show it at that point?
I don't know. I just remember the Neverending Story theme song, and that's enough for me. I'm sorry, but there's something really dark about that. It's one thing to have these children and like, you know, in a school trying to develop their talents, whatever their talents may be, but it's a completely different thing when you're forcing someone to develop a talent against their will.
As soon as you throw the word abuse in, I think it turns dark. So yeah, that was kind of like a key giveaway.
In the tunnels of like a mountain. You know, it's like Dr. Evil stuff.
Yeah.
Is that all there is to Mont?
Here is this story.
Give me the story. Thank you, Dave.
Story.
We need a story. That's what makes the world go round.
Well, we'll see how much of a story it is. This is how the Montauk Project really starts to get, as far as I know, this is how it gets its notoriety. Preston Nichols is a person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Preston Nichols also claims repressed memories. So we're going to take it back in the day to 1984, where Preston Nichols decides he's going to explore the abandoned property, and he sees all the debris, the equipment's left everywhere, and he notices this, you know, that it looks like everybody left in a hurry. It's like, yeah, no doy, dude. What do you think? Everyone's going to like clean the establishment before they leave it abandoned? It's not typical procedure there. Usually they just leave all the stuff. But he comes upon a homeless man who at first he thinks is speaking nonsense, but then eventually understands that the man is claiming that he worked at the base, the homeless man, and that a huge beast supposedly tore through the complex. I don't have much more about the huge beast, so that sucks. I wish I knew
the thing about the huge beast is they got all these people and they're playing with like unified whatever theory. They're opening all these, you know, various, I mean, come on, I don't want to sound, they're opening up all these potential
portals.
Portals, maybe, I don't know. They're messing with forces they don't understand. It's the same thing I would say to someone who picked up a Ouija board. Like, don't do this, right? Because you don't know what could pop. You don't know what you're tapping into. I mean, like you said, you were saying early on, like, oh, we can't really say there's no such thing as aliens because that would be ignorant. That's like Dave saying there's no such thing as ghosts. It's just nonsense. Like there's this whole possibility, this whole universe for us to think that like we're the only ones in it is, I mean, it's kind of silly. But that said, do I believe in aliens? I don't know. I just think that anything's possible. And what is this monster? Who knows? But geez, if that's not in Stranger Things too, right? This idea of something, and that's all tied to H.P. Lovecraft too.
Yeah.
Holy geez.
This is very Lovecraft.
Davey, one more. I got so excited. I just called you Davey. You just mentioned 1984. That's the year that Philadelphia Experiment movie came out. I don't know what that means. So there's that signal coming off this radar, opening up everybody's memories. It's happening in Montauk, and maybe it's happening to him wherever he was. Like this. Okay, holy shit. Are we figuring out that these are really?
This is real. This is a real story. So this homeless guy not only tells him that a beast tore through the complex, but then looks Nichols in the eye. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "You used to work here as well." And Nichols goes, "Nuh-uh." And the guy goes, Yeah, you did. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know about
Yeah.
all that, but no, the guy tells him he's still. I mean, that would have been so cool if like it
Mm.
actually play out that way.
So,
Um,
but did he work there?
he has no recollection of this, Greg.
Does he
He
go to
doesn't know
does
what
he go
this
to a
homeless.
psychic?
He's like, "You're crazy. I'm gonna leave now. You can stay here and tell your mumbo jumbo to the next Joe Schmo that walks through these
Mm.
doors." And he
Yeah,
leaves. He eventually returns to the base with a psychic
of
whose
course.
name is, of course, he does. His name is Duncan Cameron. Cameron's also in your story, which I thought was weird, but so I don't know if that's a connection. Um, but this is supposedly like an exceptionally gifted psychic. So he brings him to the base, and Cameron's supposedly never been there before. Seems to know this place like in and out. He's
Mm.
walking through. He's getting like these this ability to kind of like recall strange details about the facility. And at some point, he falls into a trance and he begins spitting out information about secret experiments that he was involved in right there at the base. And it's as if all these memories were blocked and now they're resurging.
Mm. Both of them, right? Essentially,
Yeah.
because they both. So any kind of gifted psychic is going to be, maybe it makes sense that he would have been noticed and used by the government and been a really good candidate for this. Maybe he volunteered for it even, and he just has no memory of that.
Well,
And it's funny in the other, we didn't really get into the guy Al Balick who had all of his repressed memories, but I mean his story just went off the wall, and it really had just way too many holes in it to even kind of go down that rabbit hole. But it's kind of the same thing where like one day he realized, wait a minute, I'm not just some guy. I'm actually a scientist too. And
yeah.
I know all these things, but why? It must be so confusing.
So this story, though, the way that Nichols eventually learns more about himself is kind of interesting. So after this visit with Cameron, strange things start to happen. He begins to notice that despite the fact that he's only an engineer, he's getting mail for like an executive type position. So he thinks that's odd. People begin to recognize him that he doesn't know who they are. He's invited to conferences that are like beyond his pay grade. One instance, like just strange things, even with his own body. Like at one point, his hand's sore, so he looks at the back of his hand and he sees there's a band-aid there that he does not recall applying. I heard another story about like blood and like kind of not knowing how he had injured himself, like weird things, like just
Well, there was this
things happen.
theory at the time, and I guess it's still technically a theory today, where if you had been, almost like a Manchurian candidate, if you had been hypnotized for a purpose, then someone could speak a word and you're out. And then then maybe you serve a purpose, they use you for whatever they use you for, and then they speak another word and you're back. Now we are practicing therapists here, right? And we went through all these, all this training. What is your depth of knowledge when it comes to hypnosis? Like, is this possible in your mind? Like, can this happen to someone where you have them almost like hypnotizing in the moment's one thing? If it's we could probably.
This isn't. I don't think that this is what this is, though. So, what he ends up discovering. So just flash forward. I'll go through it quick. He goes to a military grounds where he doesn't have authority. He ends up getting let through. He kind of follows his gut instinct. He goes to an office. There's a desk there. His name's on there. And it says, it's followed by the title Assistant Project Director. And as soon as he sees this, his memories start to trickle in. And I don't think this is hypnosis, because what he ends up realizing is that he's living in two realities simultaneously. Is that hypnosis?
I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe is it possible that he did something so heinous with the Montauk boys that he, it was so traumatic that his memories have vanished?
If he has one, just so you're to make sure you're following, he has one life where he is an engineer and another life where he's this assistant program director, project director. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was almost
like he's living those two lives at the same time.
Yeah.
And like shifting back and forth, it seems like.
I don't know what you call that.
it's like a paradoxical universe almost. Yeah, I don't know if it's the same universe, or is it the same universe and he's just coming in and out of consciousness in these within
I
these.
was almost thinking of it as he used to be the assistant project director, and then something happened, or they didn't need him anymore, or the project went kaput, and then they wiped his memory, and now he's just stumbling on it and being like, what is this?
That could be, and that would probably make sense too.
Yeah. So
I don't understand the Band-Aid thing then.
Yeah. No, the Band-Aid thing is I think that they keep them in, if they need them, they can activate some kind of hypnosis or something. I think that's the idea. I don't know. This is going off the rails, but this is why people don't trust the government.
Yeah.
Or,
well, you know, here's the thing about him that makes him like not a believable reporter. First of all, I heard that he's a little strange. Like he was like kind of in like, I read some report, like as far as like 1988, he was found on like some underground conspiracy videos, and he did one interview somewhere where he was just like wearing sunglasses all the time, and it's just really like kind of odd. He ends up writing a series of books known as the Montauk Project series, along with Peter Moon, whose real name is actually Vincent Barbaric. So I don't know why I guess it's his pen name, maybe, yeah. I guess. So the way that they frame the book, though, is these are considered to be soft facts. His recollections are soft facts. What do you when you hear soft facts, what do you take that as?
Dude, I take that as the best we've got in the moment. And I'll tell you what I mean by that is I think, dude, I always have to do this, but like, I think we live our life based on soft facts. Dude, until, you know, for hundreds, I don't know, even thousands of years, people thought the earth was the center of the universe. That to them was a hard fact, but in reality it was a soft fact because it just wasn't true. So what are the facts that we know right now that are actually soft facts? You know, it's just one of those things. Like,
you know, have you ever seen Bar Rescue?
What's that?
You ever seen Bar Rescue? John Taffer.
Yeah,
he rescues bars. Okay, so
this is a strange little.
before the bar is actually open, they do what they call a soft opening. So the bar's not actually open; it's practicing. It's a facade of what it's going to be, and they're working out the kinks. And if I think about that in the realm of facts, I feel like we're kind of throwing out these things here. They're not so much facts. They're more of just things I'm thinking or things that I like believe could be true.
Like scenarios, potential scenarios.
Yeah. Or just like, I think I remember it this way. Like, it just feels very non-reliable.
We could have a whole episode on what's the truth and what's not. I mean, it's so hard to know sometimes.
Guide to soft facts.
Oh man, I love that. So I mean, but look, think about it like this. Like I remember I recently saw this little, and I admit it was like a meme or something. And there was two, or it wasn't a meme because the guy was talking. What do we call that? Like a reel, whatever. There was two circles.
It's a totally different thing.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So there was two circles, right? And he was talking about how he was a professor in a classroom, and he was saying, look, one of these circles is bigger than the other. I know what you're thinking, like they look exactly the same, but it's not. One is bigger than the other, right? And then he goes through this whole thing, and like he's asking the class, and then the class is arguing. They're like, oh no, the blue one's bigger and the red one's bigger, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the whole time they were exactly the same size. So it just goes to show you, like, we can be primed with the right set of circumstances to think anything, to see things that aren't true.
Yeah. So if we're given information, our mind starts to filter what it's seeing through that information.
100%.
All right. So like, let's just put this out there in therapist talk. For anybody who is in therapy or is a therapist, you're going to know what we're talking about. Cognitive behavioral therapy, reframing your thoughts, looking at your thoughts as filters that we use. So when I'm looking at it through a negative filter, or like the way that I am framing my thoughts is going to impact the way I feel. And what we're saying here is the way that like the information that's within our brain at the time of us kind of thinking or seeing something affects like our new reality of whatever it is.
100%.
Do you remember a while ago there was this thing? This is like such a stupid example because I didn't actually even see it, but I remember hearing about it, where like people were saying like you could look at, I think it was a dress.
Oh yeah, I remember the dress.
And some people were saying it's this color, and then some people were saying no, it's that color.
Yeah,
I mean, I think I did see it. And I saw one color, and I had no idea what anybody was talking about. I was like, how can you see a different color? This is clearly, I forget if it was like gold or something like that.
Yeah, like, it doesn't matter, but we all know what you're talking about for sure.
How did that? I feel like that worked by like whatever you thought you were going to see, you would see, right?
Honestly, I don't know the science behind that. I don't know. We'd have to look into that. But that just goes to show you. Look, think about it like this. I give this example in the classroom. Like if there's a squirrel in a tree, and you keep direct eye contact with that thing, and it's watching you, and you're walking around the tree, but you guys don't lose eye contact at all, and you make it all the way around the tree. Did you go around the squirrel? If he kept eye contact on you and he's like trailing you and he's keeping his eyes on you, did you go around him?
I don't know.
See, some people would say, no, if you guys watched each other, like if I'm walking around you, Dave, and you're just kind of turning with me and looking at me, like some people will say, I never made it around you. Others would say, yeah, you walked around the tree, you walked around the squirrel. The squirrel's in the tree. So it's really like, that's the same thing. How can truth be easy if we can have different ideas of what the truth is and both be right?
Yeah. Here's another one, and I don't know if this is even the same type of logic. The Man in the Mountain in New Hampshire. Someone tells you, hey, the side of that mountain looks like a man's face, and you immediately start to see the face, and then you can't unsee it, right?
Right.
If no one ever told you that, you might never make that connection.
100%.
There's that giant water tower in Boston that you drive by on the side of the highway, and there's like paint streaks dripping down.
Mm-hmm.
You know about like the Fu Manchu silhouette?
No.
There's the face with like that long beard. And as a kid, somebody said a teacher was like, oh, that's Fu Manchu. I don't even really know what that means, but I know
it's a style of beard.
Yeah, it's a style of, it's like, it looks like an old man with a very, very long beard. And I see it every time I drive by that. I guarantee you there's so many people that have no idea that exists and would never see that. But in my mind, that's truth. That's real to me, that there is a Fu Manchu silhouette on that tower.
Yeah, like I love this whole thing. And I also like the way we're talking about, and this is, getting back to this a little bit, the way we're talking about kids being used for their like special abilities against their will. Yeah, the same thing was true. The same thing was true. Stuff? What's that?
You love this stuff?
No, I don't love that. Okay.
Oh, you were excited and saying how you love
it. I like this whole like creepy sort of. I love Stranger Things. I'll say that.
Abduction, Stranger Things.
Trust me, the last thing I'm doing is abducting children. I got plenty of them. But it's not just the kids. It's the doctors and these other people, scientists. They're kidnapped essentially and exploited for their powers too. Don't you see that in these sort of scenarios too? Like the doctor that has to do this against their will for whatever reason. Like I don't know, but there's always that element of it too. Also, Dave, now I'm thinking of, on some level, I read this somewhere about I didn't go as deep into the Montauk project as you did, but using people as a source of power almost, or like a battery kind of situation.
Oh, as an army. I mean, yeah. The essential idea is that they're going to make an army of people so if you train an army to be able to like have mind control over them, essentially you're making it so that they will do anything for you.
Yeah.
They become weapons themselves because they are no longer like liabilities. Like humans are liabilities. As much as we can train people and we can be determined to do our best in like really challenging situations, there's always that potential we could totally fail or just crumble apart, right?
Well, Dave, what they're doing, what you're talking about before, is they're taking these people and they're disconnecting them from themselves. They disappear, they snap their fingers, whatever, they have that word. And then when they're, they don't have any memory of what they were doing. So their morality, their their values didn't come with them, so they're dangerous. They'll do anything.
They're no longer people. They're just tools. They're instruments.
But I mean, literally, on a literal sense, there was a story about the project trying to figure out how to use people as sources of power, as batteries, and we see that in that movie Fire in the Sky. Like, he's some kind of like power source, or Terminator, or The Matrix. Isn't that what they're doing in The Matrix? They're like growing humans.
I couldn't explain The Matrix to you. I have no idea.
I've seen it a few
Like
times.
numbers.
I'm not even sure what it's about.
You don't even know how to use a computer. I'm surprised you
dude.
even cared to watch that movie.
I know. There's nothing like technology based is going to affect me. Like, I'm all set.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't even know how to be manipulated by my own technology.
So conspiracy theories are interesting because, like you said, there is an element at some point where they start to get off the rails, and like there's like, if this ended somewhere, there's a part of the story that seems super believable. Like, human experimenting seems very believable. Some of the stuff with the kids, repressed memories, like, that's all within the wheelhouse of things that, like, hey, that could happen essentially,
or even sort of have happened.
And then we get the time travel stuff.
Yeah.
And then we get, like the bodies stuck inside of ships and portals and beasts. There's a story in, I think it was 2020 or 2021, an animal washed ashore in Montauk. And this is the second time that's happened. And you can see pictures of this animal online. And they call it the Montauk creature. And somehow it's tied into bases over there. And there's other conspiracy theories. And it's just another element to all these, like, really outlandish stories. And I heard somewhere, like, it possibly could just be a decomposing raccoon body.
Oh, it's like little?
Yeah, it's not big. It's not big. It looks probably raccoon size. Its skin is disgusting. It's bloated because it's been in water. There is one where it almost looks like a turtle face, a snapping turtle face. Like, its mouth is a little different. So that one's a little weird. The second one I saw looked more raccoonish, like could be some sort of animal similar to that. But it's just interesting because there's also this facility near there where supposedly they were testing, and like, this is where West Nile virus came from and Lyme disease came from this place. I forget the name of this base that was all located at, and they think the animals might be washing ashore from there.
That you're bringing up something here that's like maybe why these things happen. It's so before 2020, I would have never, and maybe I'm naive and just walking through life, not even like realizing stuff like this, but I would have never thought there were labs where people were storing and growing various types of viruses. Like,
would you though? Maybe because you might be thinking like, oh, how else would they be developing vaccines and
right. I get that. I just I guess I didn't really realize. It seems very dangerous.
It does. And we clearly understand why it's dangerous.
Yeah. Like, there's keeping, they still have, so I dug into that a little bit after, a while back now. So I don't really remember everything, but they still have like, the plague, whatever, like bubonic plague. They still have that. They have, what do we need that for?
You never know.
It's just, and there probably is a very good reason why we need it. I just don't understand it. Maybe that's where a lot of this, maybe that is where a lot of these fears comes from, like stuff we don't understand, but I think the fear is that we can't really expect that the government understands either, because the government are just people just like us.
Well, and hear me out on this too. I think
I'm gonna hear you out.
We like being afraid. We like fear to an extent. And I think that there's a part of us that like feels that fear can help us be prepared for whatever the next thing is. And one weird thing that I noticed occurred when COVID first started, and we kind of understood it a little bit better. Suddenly you start to see all these TV shows popping up and it was all about what's going to be the next big plague, what's going to be the next big thing that we're going to pandemic that we're going to have to fight against. And it's like, this is sick. Like, this is
I know.
scary that we're like, but at the same time, I'm like, I kind of want to see.
Yeah.
I kind of want to know. And like, it's scary. I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, that sounds terrible. But at the same time, it's like, I kind of want to know. I kind of want to know what else is out there. And Greg, hear me out. Do we kind of get bored with life at times and want to believe there's some validity to these like outlandish stories because we find our own lives rather mundane?
Of course.
Like, we talk about how stressful life is and all like the challenges we face, but I feel like that doesn't compare to some of these outlandish stories that we wish were to be true, to believe there's something else.
People think that, the Salem witch trials happened because they ate some weird bread. No, they were bored stiff, like pinned down by those Puritan, rules. And it provided,
it was not a gluten allergy.
It provided something. Like it provided a spice in life. And of course, people want to believe, like, it's fun to believe.
Yeah.
And I think that's what
I used to think it would be cool if aliens existed, and then I saw War of the Worlds, and I was like, that's literally terrifying.
No, you brought up science. The scariest scene in any alien movie for me, besides Fire in the Sky, is that second clip in Science when the alien walks by. That's a tough scene.
The other big theme here that we're kind of glossing over, because we are a psychology podcast.
Talk to me.
So we're talking about conspiracies and stuff like that, and why that might be sort of desirable for some people. But the other big thing is repressed memories, that is a thing.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a dangerous thing. We talked about that with Satanic Panic.
Yeah. So
it's a dangerous thing.
There is times where we experience traumas, and our body's way of processing or getting through it, getting past it, is to block it.
Yeah, and people think it's like this fight or flight, and that's the end of it. It's way more complicated than that. I mean, especially, there's times, when you talk about when you're a kid, fight or flight neither of those are an option. So you develop other ways. You develop either defense mechanisms like repressed memories. Maybe you create a new personality.
Dissociation. Dissociation is a really common thing. I think that people do that even just in boredom.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
It goes off into a daydream, but sometimes we do it more significantly if they're dealing with like abuse, or you're in a environment that's just feels super unsafe. So
if it goes against your values at such a high level, or like against anything you ever thought was possible, like something happening, like a monster in Montauk, like that would be so terrifying that your brain would understand, like, this is such an intense fear. This person cannot handle this, and we can't even let them have this memory. Your brain is powerful, protects you from yourself.
So Preston Nichols, if we're looking at, let's pretend his story is true.
Okay, who's pretending?
He could have repressed memories from the abuse that they inflicted on the children.
100%. 100%. That's what I was trying. Yeah, that's I 100%. That's possible.
And then the giant beast that tore through the lab.
Yeah. Or no, look, it's that thing where, like, people do this all the time where they've done something so wrong that they have to create something supernatural so that they don't have to live with the fact that it was them, or they can't even, or maybe they even believe it. Like there was this, obviously we won't give any names, but there was this person who had, relations with a woman who wasn't really, I mean, it was a very kind of complicated situation where it was
President Clinton.
No. Oh. Where, like, he felt like she wasn't all right, so it was a prostitution, right? But he felt like maybe her eyes were glossed over, and maybe she was, too much drugs or something. And he did this thing. He had sex with her anyways. And then he had this thought. I've told this story in different ways. He's had this thought that it was like, convinced himself that it was supernatural, that there was something about them that was supernatural, and lied to himself about it. True story.
This podcast just took like a giant dump.
I know, dude. I know.
You really brought down the energy.
I'm sorry, man. Yeah. Honestly, what it's making me think of is AI.
Prostitution, apparently.
It's been stressed out. Yeah, I know. It's been stressing me out. Like this whole AI, like this whole element. I know I probably mentioned in the last 2 podcasts, but that's because the only reason why I bring that up is because the story, the Philadelphia experiment, it goes on and on and on. And this guy goes to the future, and it's of course controlled by AI. And I'm like, all right, that might check out.
AI is like bothering me so much lately.
Me too. It's the new.
Now I'm gonna listen to music, and I'm gonna have to try to decipher if this is really by the artist I'm listening to or if it's by some computer generated. You know about that, right? Like
100%.
Yeah, there's Drake like songs online that's Drake AI. Grimes, I just heard a song by, and that's an AI song, and I'm like, so now they don't even actually have to sing.
Dude, they're going to make it so no one has to do anything, and we're just these worthless, like taking everything that's human away from us. Like this is
AI.
It's the new religion.
This is not even Dave and Greg. This is Dave and Greg.
Honestly, this is what religion did to people for hundreds of years. Where, hey, the meek shall inherit the earth. You don't need to try. Hey, Adam, don't look at the stars. Don't try to think about what those are. That doesn't matter. Like this is the people in power keeping you where you're at. Like you don't try to like do that research for that project. There's no need to think about it. Just ask the chat GPT. It'll give you all the answers you need. Where are those answers coming from? And those are the answers. Those answers are the answers people want you to have. Not the real answers. You talk about truth.
So we say this, but there are ways for people who aren't like already in power to benefit from these things. So, like people who develop, people who find really good skills of using these things, they're going to benefit from it.
Yeah.
We get really upset because we're like, we're never going to be doing anything with AI. And like, we know how to do Zoom calls and things like that.
The thing is, it's like they say that even, doctors will be replaced by AI because any knowledge-based profession is will become obsolete.
Yeah,
except I think therapy, dude, because you can look up exactly, the answer to, this is the right treatment for you. But if it's not delivered to you in a way that's like genuine and compassionate and authentic, it's not going to work.
The reason why it's going to be really tough to replace medical professionals in general is there is a level of subjectivity that would be really hard for AI to ever be able to like understand. I think I don't know how they would program it to
like the nuance.
There's sometimes where you see a person and you just know they're off.
Mm-hmm.
You just have an instinctual feeling that they are off. There's something off about the way they're presenting, maybe in comparison to how they typically present, maybe just in general, you just get a vibe from the person. That is something I don't know how AI would sense that stuff.
Well, they couldn't, because when you're seeing someone who's off, you're seeing it because you felt it in yourself before and you can recognize it.
Sure.
So AI will never be able to do that. They'll never be able to be like, hey, look, like, I know, man. Like, I know you're hurt right now. I know what that feels like. And that's huge.
Yeah.
So before you replace us, oh boy. Yeah, listen, in AI, I've tried to like have AI like tell me a funny joke. Not funny. They're not there yet.
Where is AI? Like, where are you talking to it to tell you?
Like, you just, I don't know, like chat GPT. Just Google that, and then you can write anything in it.
Okay.
Why, you can do that?
I've never done it.
No. I just tried it just to see. I saw it. I think I saw it.
I just tried it. No big deal.
Yeah. So we could, don't judge me. Chat GPT, will I have a job in 10 years? No. Oh, geez. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys for going down our rabbit hole of going down rabbit holes.
What can you even name this episode? What was this podcast about? We gotta get back on track. Get back on track next week.
Conspiracies, I guess. Yeah. Much. So I'm not gonna lie, Greg. Like, I kind of was like sharing this with you. Like, this was interesting-ish, but like definitely not my favorite topic. I just it was harder for me to connect to this more than normal. I found, just because I was like, there's so much here that there's so much information that's like not information.
Well, I think the thing was, last week we had said we had both heard of these things. Maybe I'd heard that Montauk, like Stranger Things, was based on Montauk, and I assumed, and you know what happens when you assume, I assumed that there was some pretty cool stories attached to these. And maybe that's a little bit true. And maybe we've got whatever that is. Maybe we brought a little bit of that out.
It definitely has influenced stuff. Like, I've seen things that are related to these stories. I was sharing with you that the whole Cloverfield, and there's a couple of movies all attached to Cloverfield. Do you know what Cloverfield is? I said that and I don't know.
No, I have no idea.
Oh, so it's like a found footage movie when there's like, found footages, right?
Yes.
Like basically a person's holding like a camera and there's these monsters. I love Cloverfield. So it's a cool movie. And there's these giant monsters terrorizing like the city and they're running away from it. And then they did 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is John Goodman at his best. It's amazing performance, but basically it's like Doomsday. They're dwelling. He's telling these people that he brings into his basement that like outside the world's like devastated, and they think he's crazy. And in the end, I'm not going to spoil it, but like he was kind of right. And then the monsters come out and it kind of connects to Cloverfield. And then there's Cloverfield Paradox, which was like a Netflix movie, I think. I didn't care for that one, but a connection there is there was bodies found within they're on like a spaceship or something, or some kind of like, and their bodies are found within the ship, like kind of like the Philadelphia experiment. And then I realized that like that connection to Philadelphia experiment, there's also like this idea of like there being different, like a portal, which we also discussed in there, and like these two different versions of reality, which you also discussed. So I think that like the whole series of movies,
it's definitely there. The ideas are all there. It's just there's not a cohesive enough story.
Yeah.
But when I thought of the people, and now you got me thinking of something. When I thought of the people stuck in the walls and everything, what I always, like a huge fear of mine, and you've seen it in a couple different types of horror, is people getting stuck in like paintings or something. Like I live in this painting now. You know that whole thing?
Yeah.
Like what's that movie, Witches, with the little the mice and everything?
Yeah.
Great movie. But
Roald Dahl.
Yeah, dude, Kiss Kiss is a book of short stories by Roald Dahl, and it is some of the more terrifying short stories that you can imagine.
It's funny, like, and we're so going off on tangents in this episode, but it's all right.
Yeah.
Chris Van Allsburg, who did Polar Express, I loved Chris Van Allsburg as a kid. His books were so dark. He did a book where it was just various pictures related to like, and you like, there was no story. It was like just a bunch of different scenes of like, I forget. I wish I had this book. It scared me. It was like so dark. His artwork always had a lot of shadows, and it just was like off-putting, which is similar to actually the movie Polar Express, which is off-putting.
Oh yeah.
But like Polar Express was such like and even Jumanji, the artwork was kind of dark in Jumanji.
Yeah.
And then Polar Express was like this totally different being.
So I understand the whole Uncanny Valley, obviously, element to Polar Express, but I got to be honest, I just think it's a Christmas classic and I love it. I mean, I was
actually more talking about like these children's authors and like having like this darker like element.
I love that, dude. Neil Gaiman. I mean, I guess you can kind of call Coraline a children's movie. Yeah. Super dark, scary, really. That's like two alternate parallel universes too. I guess it's all kind of.
I think this stuff like definitely is presented in a lot of the stuff that we, a lot of our sci-fi and horror elements, like there is this kind of carries over into all that stuff. So anyways, interesting topics. So hopefully everybody made it this far. Who knows? Could probably be saying anything because no one's listening at this point. But thanks you guys for listening. We'll be back next week. As we always say, if you guys are so inclined, we would love it to hear your feedback. Leaving it on Apple would be absolutely delightful. We promise we will read it on our next episode if you do so, just because we will be so thrilled, whether it's good or bad. feel free to leave your remarks.
But if it's bad, just leave the bad review, but 5 stars.
So thank you again, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you next week.